Hello, and welcome to Off the Beaten Path. Today I'm at Fort Independence. The fort is located on Castle Island, which guards Boston's harbor. There's been a fort on Castle Island since the 1640s. Originally made of wood and called Castle Williams, the fort went through several iterations before it was captured by the Continental Army in 1776, and renamed to Fort Independence. The current structure was completed in the 1870s, though some parts are much older. The fort has staunchly defended Boston's harbor, and even inspired one of America's foremost authors, Edgar Allan Poe. The fort was decommissioned in 1962. Today, a local historical society runs and maintains the fort, offering free tours to those curious about seeing inside. The island also is now connected to the mainland, with a causeway being built in the 1930s, enabling you to get there on foot. Among locals, the area is mainly known for its beach, Pleasure Bay. Few pay attention to the castle, nor to rich history. The fort is a standard five-pointed star fort, with its main entrance facing towards the south. Tours meet at this main entrance, with interested tourists starting to line up about 10 minutes before the tour begins. There are no tickets, so the tours are run on first-come, first-served basis. As our tour begins, we see the parade grounds, as well as one of the few remaining intact batteries of the fort. Continuing onward, we come to the artillery ramp. Along its side, you can see some of the earliest flags flown over the fort, those of the British Empire and the early colonies. The fort was heavily involved in the lead-up to the American Revolution. The stamps for the Stamp Act were stored here in the 1760s and 70s. The fort also served as a safe haven for British officials in the periods of social unrest following the Boston Massacre. Later, during the Siege of Boston, the fort served as the British stronghold in the city until they were driven out by George Washington. Those that remember their high school history will know Washington fired on the British with cannons captured at Fort Ticonderoga in New York. These cannons were fired from a makeshift fortification constructed overnight on Dorchester Heights, which can be seen here. From the high ground, the Continental Army was able to bombard the fort out of range of the fort's cannons, eventually leading to the British surrender and the evacuation of Boston. Continuing on the tour, we come to the only mortar and oldest piece of artillery in the fort. This mortar is from the Civil War and was found in a Boston cemetery, likely a part of an old Civil War memorial. Shortly after its discovery, the city donated the mortar to the fort, so it would be preserved as part of its history. While the mortar is cool, it likely would not have been used at the fort. It was an infantry weapon with relatively low range. To see what type of artillery would have been used here, we must go through these tunnels. The tunnels look like they would lead to a dungeon or something, but they are actually a form of blast proofing. They isolate the main batteries, which would have had large amounts of explosives, from the rest of the stores and supply dumps. Here we see the main armament of the fortress, the massive 55,000-pound Rodman gun. These cannons would have had an effective range of nearly 3 miles, and could fire projectiles powerful enough to sink a ship in a single shot. The point batteries have impressive fields of fire. The 2 Rodman guns in this battery could fire on ships just about anywhere in the harbor. While today, the fort's guns are silent, the power and range of the fort's cannons were enough to scare the British so much they never attacked the city of Boston in the War of 1812. The same war saw many less defended coastal cities, such as those in the Chesapeake Bay, attacked, ultimately leading to the burning of the White House in Washington, D.C. Boston was spared from such a fate thanks to its superior defenses. You may be wondering why the top of the fort is covered with grass. This is a form of camouflage. From far away, the grassy top makes the fortress look like a hill and hides its main batteries, confusing any potential attackers. Continuing along, we come across a blocked tunnel. There are several of these all around the fort. These tunnels used to lead to secondary batteries located outside the present fort, which have since been demolished. It is believed that these bricked-up passageways, coupled with a popular ghost story, inspired Edgar Allan Poe to write The Cask of Amontillado. Poe was stationed at the fort as a young man. Trying to avoid debtors and his adopted father, he enlisted at the fort with a fake name. He served here for 3 years, performing well, achieving the highest rank available to a non-commissioned officer, and publishing his first book of poetry, Tamerlane and Other Poems, which he published anonymously. His time at the fort clearly influenced him, as he adapted a popular story about an illegal duel into one of his greatest works. In 1817, Lieutenant Robert F. Massey and Gustavus Drain fought a duel over a dispute that arose during a game of cards. Of the two, Massey was incredibly popular, whereas Drain was hated and despised for being a corrupt and despicable officer. Unfortunately for the soldiers, Drain won the duel, slaying Massey. The legend goes that in response, the enraged soldiers mutinied, killing Drain and breaking him up inside the walls of the fort. Drain, being the evil man he was never able to rest properly though, and is said to be heard trying to claw his way out of his palisade grave. While it's a great story, there is no evidence that this ever happened. The duel did happen, but Drain kept on living, and there are army records of him until the 1830s. A skeleton was found in the walls in 1905, but the portion of the fort in which it was found wasn't built until the 1860s, long after Poe left. Still, ghost stories were common among soldiers at the time, and it is easy to see how the duel and the various bricked-up passageways could give rise to such a tale. Back to the tour, it continues along the walls and visits a few other of the batteries before returning to the parade grounds, where it concludes. However, before the tour ends, we are treated to 2 more cannons. These ones are from the Civil War era, from 2 separate naval vessels, one the USS Unadilla and the other the USS Currituck. If you would like to visit Fort Independence, it is located in South Boston, about a 15-minute drive from downtown. The fort and park are one of the few places in Boston in which parking is free and ample. The fort is open weekends from noon to 3 and is accessible by tours only. The tours leave every 30 minutes. Tours are free and are well worth taking, going over lots of Boston and fort history. Overall, I'd give the fort 1 star. It is worth going to if you are already in Boston, and a nice stop most tourists miss, but not worth going too far out of your way for. A reminder that my system is based off of how far you should travel to visit the attraction. 1 star is worth a short trip. 2 stars is worth a long trip. 3 stars is worth a full day trip. 4 stars is worth a weekend trip. And 5 stars is worth being the destination of a long road trip. I hope you enjoyed this video and will join me next time I take you off the beaten path.